just
Sure.
because I'll forget to start it and then I'll be like, ah.
Mhm.
So yeah, and we'll do that at the end. So you have a little bit of time to think about it. Okay, let me just trying to get situated here. Okay, you don't see any clothes, right? We're all
No.
great back here.
How many
All right.
musical instruments do you see? Too many.
It's awesome. I love it. It's awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll just pause for a second. I will have just read your bio from what you sent me, and then we'll just kind of launch into the podcast. So I'll pause for a second, and then I'll say hi. Are
Okay.
you good? Okay. All right. Hi, Barbara. This is Dr. Barbara Hamilton, and I am so excited to have you on today, a fellow physician. Um, let's tell the audience a little bit about what you do.
Hi, I'm Barbara Hamilton, and I'm an interventional and diagnostic radiologist in Southern California. So basically, I look at people's insides for a living. And part of my time I spend driving through the body and doing image guided interventions, which means some of the things that we used to have to do surgery for, we can now do through little pinhole entries, like in a blood vessel or in the skin.
And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is not only because you do a lot of different amazing and dynamic things. You're like the very definition of a Renaissance woman. I also wanted to talk to you because interventional radiology has very few women, kind of like orthopedics. What percentage is it right now?
It ranges from 8 to 10%, and it's stayed that way for a couple of decades now. So it's just been static. We became a primary specialty in medicine, so we became a specialty alongside medicine and surgery a couple years ago. I think it was official in 2017. So that is helping us to get more women coming into the pipeline, but I think we still have a really leaky pipeline.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think it's multifactorial. It's a question I get all the time. And I think, it's part of it is you have to see it to believe that you can become it. Or there's that quote that I'm not getting quite right. But, in some areas, there are no female interventional radiologists. And so it's hard to go through such a path that takes so much commitment and effort when you don't see anyone like you, and it's easy for that doubt to creep in, like self-doubt, like, do I belong here? And so that's why I started my blog, and it's my mission to personally like demystify what it is to be a woman in IR, because I think some people don't have an opportunity to know, and so they're dissuaded from doing it for the wrong reason.
I think sometimes students come into medical school not really even fully knowing what the opportunities are out there and what the possibilities are, and or even knowing
Totally.
what interventional radiology is, or even like when I started, I had no idea about orthopedics at all. It was kind of a happy accident, but yeah, so it's good to, I think, share your knowledge with not only people in medicine, but I think your blog, having looked at it, seems to reach way beyond that, not just folks that want to go into radiology,
I
interventional
hope so.
radiology.
It's my mission to reach people, also women in male dominated fields like IR, interventional radiology, and surgery. I feel like we have so much in common. So I would love to offer myself to the women who want to pursue IR, but there are so many other women. I just feel like I have this to offer. I can, I used to wonder, am I going to sacrifice my quality of life to be on call? I'm going to attend to people who are bleeding in the middle of the night. And there are people who will tell you that's not a good idea. But people need you. So, I mean, to say that half of the talent pool shouldn't consider this because of their gender is crazy. And so I
Right.
just rail against that in my writing.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to back up a little bit and ask you about where you grew up, what that was like, and what sort of shaped you in becoming who you are today.
Wow. So
It's a big
I
question. I know it was like a three-part question. I need to be a little bit more gotta simplify that a little bit. But yeah,
no,
so
I
it's
love
like a
it.
3, 4, 5-part question. But have at it.
I feel like you're so interested. So, yeah, I mean, I grew up as a product of two immigrants from each from Eastern Europe. So my mom grew up on a Polish farm, like on a dirt floor in the house, and she came to the U.S. when she was 6. So she has no accent. You know, she's Americanized, but you know, of course, like my grandfather was his childhood was shaped by World War II. In Poland and the hardships that that brought. So on the mom's side, very, you know, bootstrap,
Hmm.
bootstrappy. And then likewise on my dad's side, my dad actually fled communism in the former Czechoslovakia. And so then they both met in the New York, New Jersey area. And that's where I grew up. So I grew up in New Jersey in a very middle class, like kind of environment, just in the woodsy part of New Jersey where it kind of looks like Pennsylvania. It's just kind of calm and a quiet place to grow up. And so, and then my dad was an engineer. I think he wanted me to be a computer programmer. And my mom wanted me to be an architect because that's, I think, what she wanted to do. But my mom, incidentally, was a psychological counselor for many years, and she actually got burnt out. So
Mm.
when people started talking about burnout, I thought, oh, I've been hearing this since I was a tween, you know, about burnout in the medical field. So I'm sure all of that has shaped me. And yeah, so my dad was afraid of blood. I think he was surprised I wanted to be a doctor. And I think, I mean, I'm the first stateside doctor in my family, but there was one aunt in the Czech Republic because apparently medicine is less male dominated in the setting of communism. So
Huh. Oh, I
kind
didn't
of
realize that.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if they're not paid as much. It could be a dynamic there, but
Hmm.
you know, so I did have a doctor in the Czech Republic in the family. So
Cool.
basically, yeah, as you said, I came into medical school not knowing anything. I knew, you know, my family doctor who diagnosed pyelonephritis once, and I knew about my dermatologist because I had some acne, and you know, these were the things. So I thought dermatology would be really cool because it was visually oriented, and that was probably one of my first clues. And then yeah, I just thought I would be a PA. So as I volunteered in my local ER, I thought I saw a woman PA and I thought, oh, I could be like her. So
Hmm.
that was my first. And then somehow I made the leap to, oh, I could do medical school. So I think that happened somewhere in college. I saw the other pre-meds around me as I pursued my bio degree.
Yeah. And you're like, why not?
Yeah, I think I thought, why not?
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. So we have a lot in common, actually. I was born in New Jersey. I was born in Freehold, but raised in Southern California. My dad was
Wow.
also an engineer and also two immigrants. So we have a
Wow.
lot in common. So, who were your biggest influences in deciding to pursue medicine? And then once you were there, who influenced you to head in the direction of interventional radiology?
Yeah, I think just my surface interactions with the family doctor and the dermatologist somehow, I think that
Hmm.
was enough for me.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, there was a little bit of familial, like my parents got divorced at a certain point, and there was
Mm.
I think part of me was really like, I need to find stability. I need a really stable career. I need to take care of myself. And I think that's been a driving force in like a lot of the self empowerment that I talk about now. That it's important for women to be able to take care of themselves and then also to financially empower themselves because we don't want to rely on somebody else who may not be reliable, you know, to take care of us
Mhm.
financially. And I just think it's important. So we have a lot of physicians who are married to other physicians. You know, I think this message is important for everybody to financially empower yourself. So I write about personal finance because that became a hobby of mine along the way. I think it's a really important aspect of, you know, empowering yourself as a female physician and balance and all of it.
Right. And at what point did you kind of have your eyes open to the importance of financial empowerment? Was there an experience where you said, "Oh my gosh, I got to pay attention to this"?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my husband is a musician, so I'm the breadwinner in the family. And I realized what a tremendous responsibility that was when I got those first few paychecks. So even at a fellow salary, I think we were on the same page as far as not overspending, and that
Hmm.
was a good thing. But then as the salary jumped to, the post fellowship salary, then it became important. I realized, a huge amount of this is going to tax. I need to figure that part out. And then like, what are these different buckets? What is the, thinking about how to treat the money properly so it could grow and just take care of us in return.
Hmm. And I know on your, well, first of all, on your blog, your website, I really love the name of your website, Tired Superheroine. Is that right?
Thank you. Yeah.
How did you come up with that name? Did you say, I kind of feel sometimes like I'm a superheroine, but man, I'm exhausted because I was just up all night on call. Tell me about your inspiration for that.
Yeah, so part of it is the aspirational and inspirational, the superhero, the superheroine. I think that when you're waking up, or you're, whether it's 4 o'clock or 4 in the afternoon or 4 a.m., you're stopping someone from exsanguinating. You qualify as a superhero in my book. And
Okay, and I'm
so
going to interrupt. It's exsanguinating for like our non-medical listeners, meaning like bleeding till you die, bleeding to death.
yes. So, as an interventional radiologist, I attend to life-threatening emergencies. Not everything I'm doing is attending to a life-threatening emergency, but some of the most important and gratifying things I do are. And so that's a big part of, I guess, who I've become. And I want to encourage other people who want to do the same to follow the trade that I have. I don't know if others would call it a trade. It's a wonderful field to be in. It's so gratifying. And then the tired aspect is, women are expected to do a lot in our society. And so if they're, the tired aspect is the female breadwinner learning personal finance in her spare time, in between changing diapers on her 2-year-old.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
one night I'm tired because I woke up to go into the hospital to do a case, to help somebody. And the other night I'm waking up because my baby's crying. So these are all really fulfilling things to me, that like tired can be a good thing. And I see it as a really like tired in a positive way. So I hope that
Yeah.
that comes across.
Yeah. And did you have your child after you were done training? Were you already an attending physician when you became a
Mhm.
mom?
Yeah. I think this is such a personal decision for women who enter like male dominated fields
For
and
sure.
medicine.
Yeah.
And for me, just the timing worked out that I was married after training anyway. And um, for some people, that's a consideration in childbearing.
Hmm.
And I think there are benefits to doing it in training, but I wasn't set up to do that. And I've definitely seen the benefits of doing it as an attending. You're just
Yeah.
so much more set up financially to bear any costs, and just feel more settled. So
Right. It definitely is a really personal decision. And having talked to many other women going through med school and or training or finishing up their training, it's nice to have a little bit of a safe space where you can talk to other women orthopedic surgeons to
mhm.
say, hey, what did you do here? And how did you handle this? And I think while we need to have the support of both the men and the women around us as mentors and as role models, I think that it's hard to have that conversation when you're the only woman in the room. And
Mhm.
so having these women colleagues, I think, is important. And for you, what you're doing, writing about it and blogging about it, I think is important to, like you said before, give other women who want to do what you want to do or do what you do, uh, give them a role model to look up to and somebody they could actually ask that question to, right?
Mhm.
But
I'm
it is
calling
very
myself a
personal.
virtual role model. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
I
it's a
love that.
wonderful time to be alive. I mean, we have these virtual platforms. And when I was growing up, I mean, I was in a great residency program, but they hadn't had an IR fellow in that program since the 90s, like
Oh,
for
wow.
a couple of decades at that point. And you just wonder, why is that? You know? Like, so it was a great place to do residency, but didn't have a female IR in the state. I mean, it's a
Mhm.
small state, but still, I mean, it's significant when you just don't feel like you have a role model who looks like you. So yes, I agree with you. I had fantastic male mentors.
Mhm.
I did have one um, instance where someone regarded as a very nice man, you know, told me when I told him my plans, he said, "Yeah, right."
Oh
So
gosh.
right along those, you know, sometimes you're not sure what you're going to get from your
Yeah.
attending. And
Mhm.
those comments can just slap someone across the face. And so I hope I can be like a place to land for people who don't have someone nearby, or, you know, because you're very impressionable at that point. And the people around you really affect the way you feel about your confidence to pursue what you really dream of.
So when that person said, "Yeah, right," to you, clearly just, in disbelief and with, you know, sarcasm, and so what made you think, and I don't know if you thought this is what I would have thought, I would have thought, "F you, I'm gonna do this anyway." But what made you keep going and in some ways ultimately write it off as opposed to really taking it to heart and stopping you from doing what you wanted to do?
hmm I took a look at the source, and I think, you know, he's not a person who knew me as well as some others in my department. I think, you know, he came across as supportive sometimes, but ultimately, I think his reaction was there had been recently before me another female radiology resident who, you know, proclaimed that she would do IR and then backed out to do
Mm,
women's imaging, which was a common thing that was kind of pressed on us. If we were women, it was kind of, it was assumed to some degree and by different people to varying degrees that women didn't want to be on call for emergencies. They didn't want to do kind of the, I mean, IR is not really dirty work, but there's some blood involved. Um, and and there's some, you know, you're wearing a lead suit to do the work that you do. Now it's much lighter than it used to be because they have better materials and things. So technology helps. So yeah, I mean, there was just this, you know, oh, it's too physical, it's too demanding for women. There was all this, you know, with call that it was this perception that it wasn't for women. And it's just this old boy kind of mentality that I was able to look at the source and sort of write it off for those reasons.
mhm.
And then there was somebody else in the department who actually took me out for a sandwich and said, you know, "You're not her." And that really meant a lot to me.
Yeah, yeah. And so on your one of the things you do on your blog is you've created kind of a mini training to help people keep going strong on their
Mhm.
path. Tell me a little bit about what that's all about.
Yeah, I feel so passionate about this. So I put together an audio resource. It'll take about 15 minutes of your time. But it details, it's actually, I was invited to do a medical student scholar talk that got canceled because of the coronavirus. And so it was sort of a version of that talk. And it
Awesome.
was about some of my most cringeworthy failures in going through training and what I learned from them. And at this point, I can say I'm a physician leader. I'm a leader in my community. I'm a leader at my hospital. And there were just so many times along the path where I could have doubted that, or other people didn't seem to see me as a leader. And so this audio is kind of like a pat on the back for those people who are having a hard day. You know, just because you're passed over for chief resident, or, you know, you're just not, you're having a rough day, or you were told that you need to bone up on something, or you completely failed at something else. I mean, this is, you know, it's a messy path to becoming a physician, even a successful one. And that's what I wanted to demonstrate with this talk. So it's called 7 Things to Keep You Going Strong on the Path to Becoming a Doctor. But it's not just for medical students, it's for trainees too.
And so then, of course, I'm going to have to ask you, what was one of your messiest? I mean, what was one of the big obstacles and or failures that you had throughout either your schooling or your training or even afterwards when you became an attending? And I'd love to hear more about that and then how you dealt with it.
Sure. I guess I'll save the ones that are in 7 things.
Yes, of course.
So you can find
For
that by going,
suspense.
yeah, because I have plenty more to share. So I'll give you one that didn't make it into that specific cut.
Yeah.
So yeah, people can get to that 7 things recording by signing up at my website. There's a happy
Mhm.
little red coffee cup that says "Go get 'em." I wish I
That's cute.
had this physical coffee cup, but it's just an image that I got. And so if you click on that, you sign up for my email list, which will get you weekly updates from my blog. And that's on work-life balance, financial empowerment, and all the things we're talking about right now. So one of the things early in my career, I had one instance where there were some equipment failures, and that really shook my early professional confidence. So I actually had a few guide wires, which we use every day in interventional radiology. So we'll like advance a little plastic tube called a catheter over a wire to navigate somewhere in the body under X-ray guidance. And I'd been using these wires for years. And then all of a sudden, it was like a 2-month period where I had 3 wires break off in a patient. So as I'm driving around in the patient, a part of the wire just fractures off and goes into
Yeah.
the bloodstream. And I had to go either fish it out, or there was even one instance we had to report it as a retained foreign body because I was closing off an aneurysm anyway. I thought, oh, I'll leave it there. But then I didn't realize that as far as the state of California, that's a reportable incident because
Mm.
it's an unintended foreign body. So it's just a whole mess. And then, I mean, a year later, I'm chief of my section. So it didn't stop me from doing that. It was just a setback. And it was a very identifiable setback where it kind of like shook my confidence. And I
Mhm.
had to really like swallow my pride and say, like, obviously, I know how to use a guide wire. Like, this is the most basic element of my training, but something's going wrong here. So I tried to investigate. I reported to the FDA, like, these are the wires I'm using, tried to see if they were the same lot or if there was something about my technique. I was posting all over the message boards online and just
Mhm.
trying to, rather than going inward and just ruminating about my failure, um, I guess it's a good example of I was able to go outward and try to resolve it that way. And so, yeah, I had to swallow my pride. I had to basically be reproctored
Mhm.
to have somebody else say that I still knew how to use a guide wire.
Mhm.
And, you know, if you wanted to be embarrassed about that, you could, but I just chose not to be. And just, we did that to preemptively say, so if a regulatory agency came in, we could
Right.
say, this is what we did about it.
Right, exactly. And for the listeners who are not in medicine, I mean, I think most people know if they've ever gone to a physician and um, had any kind of procedure. One of the things that we talk to our patients about, we talk about all the things we can do to make them better, but it's an obligation to really educate our patients of the things that can go wrong.
Mhm.
And it is often not an issue where there is any kind of negligence or any wrongdoing on the physician's part, but it's just complications happen in any kind of
And you
procedure.
can't and you
And
can't cover everything. I mean, could I have
and
foreseen
yeah.
that these products I had relied on for years
Mhm.
suddenly break apart? I mean, it was just unbelievable to me. So,
Right.
yeah, we do. We try to go over all the risks and benefits as far as we can. I mean, some people think that to protect ourselves, we should consent for death, but I mean, that's hard to do when you're going
Yeah.
in for a simple procedure.
Right. That is hard. And but I sometimes I feel like when I'm going through all the potential risks of a procedure that I almost sound like the end of those commercials on TV where they're
Mm.
advertising a new drug. And by the way, it might also cause XYZ and this and that, and you might die, and then your like foot might fall off. And I mean, it's like this big laundry list. But it's an important part of as physicians when we talk to our patients, informed consent so that they are aware of all the things that could potentially happen. But
It's so hard. Yeah.
statistically, not likely, right?
I think it's hard. I think the patients can tell when you've said something 100 times before or
Yeah,
more.
yeah.
You do start to
And
sound like the commercial.
It's true, and I think sometimes it does become very routine, but, I know for me, if it's something that is specific to that particular procedure, and I may say, "You know what? This is something that I actually have seen. This is something that can happen a little bit more commonly than X, Y, and Z on that big
Mhm.
laundry list." Right?
Yeah. And that adds a very human element to the consent.
Yeah,
Or you're at slightly
definitely.
increased risk of this particular, like a pneumothorax or something.
Yeah. So, um, I want to know, you hold a number of different roles and positions in which you are a physician leader, both within your department as well as on a more national level with the National Organization for Interventional Radiologists, right? Tell
Mhm.
me a little bit about what. Well, tell me about those roles, but also tell me how you think women lead differently.
Hmm. So I fell into some of these roles kind of earlier in my career, I think, because of where I practice.
Mhm.
So at my local level, I guess I'll start there. So becoming chief of my section, this was just unbelievable. But they actually asked me to be chief of my section as I was returning from maternity leave. So I talk about that on my blog, and it's, not something that's expected, I think.
I think they must have missed you.
They missed me, and I think that's one of the, I guess, perspectives I like to share on my blog is that, we just as women are taught to see pregnancy and childbearing as a liability. And I did not realize when I left for 10 weeks that they would be dying for me to come back, and just they would realize at a new level how much I had contributed. So it was kind of, my stock rose during that time, and that was really refreshing. And so I just wanted to
Yeah,
share that with other women,
absolutely.
because it's like you are working hard. And then you leave, there's this big vacancy, there's this big hole where you were. And they had to call in, a bunch of locums and cover me, and they're hemorrhaging money doing this. And so when I came back, they were very grateful. So I think that's something. Yeah. And then other times that I've kind of fallen into these leadership positions, it's just like kind of being in the right place at the right time. I think women lead maybe differently because they have to deal with different expectations. But that said, I'm in Southern California. I'm in a place where it's not so unusual, thankfully, for people to see women leading. So the chair of radiology on the hospital administrative side is a male, but then the lead of CT, MR, IR, and ultrasound is a woman. So she's running like the majority of she's boots on the ground. And she does a fantastic job. So, gosh, that's such a tough question.
But
So
I
I'm
think you bring up
lucky.
a good point.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't know how I would do as a leader in other places. I think one of the things that's helped me become a leader is to build up some relationships over time so that there's a context. So if you're redirecting someone, or if you have to actually criticize someone in any way or like redirect, then there's a little bit more of a
Mm.
like relationship background, which helps. And I think that especially helps if you're a woman, and just because that's what people expect. But that said, I've just tried to educate myself as much as possible. And maybe that's another thing that women do, is we just try to be qualified, and we don't necessarily just assume we are. So that's certainly been helpful to read up on like these business texts that we didn't do in medical school and we didn't have time for, but things, business books, leadership books.
Right. I've definitely picked up much more on that type of reading after I got out of training because I finally had a little bit more time to do some so-called leisure reading. I read business books and leadership books in my leisure time. But
Right.
yeah, we don't always get a lot of that in schooling and in training. And sometimes it's just the massive volume of what we need to digest and retain as we're going through school and then residency and then fellowship. And for the listeners who aren't as familiar with the whole process after a 4-year degree, an undergraduate, to go to medical school. It's 4 years. If people decide they want an MD and a PhD, then that's like a 7-year program usually. And then residency is where you're a junior doctor and you're practicing, but under the guidance of somebody who is an attending physician. And so for you, was that for orthopedics? That's 5 years plus. For me, usually a 1-year fellowship. For me, I did a 1-year sports fellowship, but for you, residency was 4 years. Is that correct? And then how many more years for the interventional?
There was so radiologists do a prelim year, so they can do
Hmm.
medicine, surgery, or a transitional year, which I did. 4 years of just imaging of the body, all different modalities, head to toe, and then most people subspecialize from there. So I did 1 year of IR, but the training paradigm for IR is changing a bit. So interventional radiology, it has its own, it has like 3 different pathways now.
Oh, okay. And they all take the ultimately about the same amount of time and end up in the same place though,
Yeah,
right?
roughly 6 to 7 years post grad.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And so what
absolutely.
spurred you to dive into the business books? Like, was it leadership at work, just realizing that you're the de facto leader of your medical team, or like, what was it for you?
I think for me it was just a different facet of self-development that I felt like I didn't really get in medicine, at least in school or in residency training. And it was just so focused on the, like, this is totally like an unintended pun, but like the nuts and bolts of it, where I didn't get a chance to develop the leadership skills. And so that was actually really, it was fascinating for me to read about afterwards, because I wanted to develop that facet. I'm in private practice, and so I run a small business, and there's a lot of learning on the go. There's a lot of learning on the go, and so this was what I considered sort of my self-taught part. So, well, I want to know, for you, having gone through this path as a woman and as a mom and all the other great things that you are, writer, blogger, educator, leader, um, if you had one piece of advice to give to someone who wants to do what you want to do, or even just pursue a career that is very male dominated, what do you think that piece of advice would be?
Okay, I have a quote from Brooke Castillo, and she's a life coach instructor. She has a great podcast, and that's been part of my post medical education too. And she says, discomfort is the currency of your dreams. And I think that if I had that sentiment earlier in my medical career, I would be able to see some of the challenges a little bit differently,
Mm-hmm.
and see them more as fuel for growth, because, yeah, personal growth has just been something in the last few years.
Yeah, I
I'm
hear that.
sorry if you can hear that.
That's okay. This is like real life. This is mom life. And so that's okay. This is just the reality. We juggle and we wear so many hats, right? And so you're
Yeah,
doing a podcast, but you're still a mom. You still
and
have
dad is
kids.
taking care of it. So I'm very
Right?
grateful.
Dad's in control.
But there's a microphone here. I'm sure it's picking up some of that. It's just screaming. So I have a
That's
2-year-old
okay.
now. And so, yeah, he's very two sometimes.
That's totally normal. So if our listeners want to keep up with you and read what you're writing or take some of your mini courses, where can they find you online?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and featuring me in my project. And just, it feels so good to have somebody in the trenches, like encouraging others to pursue these male dominated fields, because we can break into the boys club. I love what I do, and I don't want other women to keep themselves from it for the wrong reasons. So if it's
Right.
not for you, totally fine. You don't want to be on call. I get it. But if you do, if you want this, yeah, I can help you see what it looks like. And that's tiredsuperheroine.com. So tired and then superheroine with an E at the end. And my opt-in there on my page is the little coffee cup. It's 7 things to keep you going strong on the path to becoming a doctor. I'm also on all the channels. So on Twitter, tired was too long, so it's at T Superheroine. On Instagram, I show little snippets of what desert life is like and taking my little kid hiking, and little snippets of, blog previews at Tired Superheroine on Instagram. And I think I got them all.
That's great. I really enjoyed having you on today, and even talking to another medical professional. I always learn so much, and it's always so insightful for me. So I was very excited to talk to you. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Yay.
Yay! I have a friend who's an
Yeah.
ortho too, by the way.
Oh,
Just like
okay.
wanted to say that.
Are you in Palm Desert, or where are you in?
Palm Springs.
You're
Yeah,
in
right
Palm
next
Springs.
door.
Oh, okay, cool, cool. I
Hmm.
grew up in LA, and so have
Nice.
passed through there a lot. So it's
What
my
part
old
of
haunt.
what part of LA?
I grew up in Hacienda Heights.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's like San Gabriel Valley, it's Whittier, La Puente, kind of
Yeah,
that
I've heard of it.
area. Yeah.
My
And
LA geography is not great, but I was at UCLA for fellowship, so we were there for a
oh,
year.
okay. That's my undergrad.
Nice. So funny
Yeah,
all the things we have
awesome.
in common.
I know. I was born in Freehold. And so
Yeah.
where did you grow up in New Jersey? Now, I didn't stay there for very long, so I actually don't know very much about New Jersey
Oh,
geography.
really? So
Yeah.
what age were you there till?
Oh, I was born there, and then we literally left like when I was a couple months old, and then I
Whoa.
wasn't back there until I started med school at age 29, and so I went to Drexel in Philly.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was like the
A
next
slap
time
in
I
the
was
face.
no, that was the next time I was like close to New Jersey, and I actually had some rotations on the Jersey Shore as a med student, and remember passing through the hospital where I was born, and I was like, nope, doesn't seem remotely familiar. But yeah, so I was pretty much raised in California until I went back to the East Coast for med school much later.
It fascinates me when people are born and raised in California and then go somewhere like Philly for training. I'm like, wow.
It's
I mean,
crazy.
it seems like just putting yourself through the ringer, weather-wise, like
Yeah.
murder-wise, all of the above. Like,
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely a huge culture shock. I think, the weather was definitely different. And then my first like foray to Target, like you go to Target in Southern California and everyone's like smiling at you and they're nice. And then you go to Target in Philly and people are like, what do you want? I
yeah.
was like, oh my God, where am I? But I actually really grew to love being in Philly. There were the people getting murdered in front of me. There was somebody shot like on my street.
Oh
There
my
it
God.
definitely was a little bit crazy, but overall a good experience. And I actually was kind of homesick for Philly when I left Philly to go to Richmond, Virginia. Another just
Wow.
very different place. So that was
Yeah.
I'm in Portland, Oregon. And so, I went Philly and then I went to Richmond. I met my husband in Philly in med school. Then we did our residencies and fellowship in Richmond, Virginia before we decided to move back west, and we landed in Portland.
Oh my gosh. You've seen most of both coasts.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been good.
So
And
adventurous. Yeah,
yeah.
so like where I grew up was just north of Route 80. It was like in the top of the state, in
Oh,
New Jersey,
okay.
where there's kind of like nothing up there above Route 80.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
it's just hills and lakes. It's just a small town. But
Hmm.
Morristown is the town that most people recognize,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
like so
And
Morris County.
I think and I don't know exactly which town, but my mother-in-law, so my husband's mom, is from that part of New Jersey.
Yeah, it's a pretty part.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the
It was
kind of
really
like,
pretty.
yeah, it's the part where you'd like want to go see the leaves and stuff like that. If you
Yeah.
didn't want to
Yeah.
drive all the way up to New England, you could like go through the rolling hills and it's very pretty.
Is your family still out there?
My mom's whole family is in New Jersey and my
Oh,
dad's whole
wow.
family is still in Europe. So
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
they're just
Cool.
dealing with that over there.
Oh, where are they in Czech or where?
Mhm. Yeah, the Czech
Oh man.
Republic.
Yeah. Wow.
So I don't, everybody's hunkered down, I guess.
Mhm.
So
I
how many
bet.
years are you out in practice?
I'm 9 years.
Oh, wow.
9 years
Nice.
out. Yeah, and how
And you've
about
been in
you?
the same private practice the whole time?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
wow.
which is kind of a record, I think, because a lot of people switch
Yeah.
within 2 years, and
Yeah.
I've been there a while. I may be making a little bit of a transition. I was almost gonna make a transition this year, but then the COVID happened and, like, all of that fell apart. But it's okay, we really wanted to stay here in Portland, and now I may make a transition and actually stay here in Portland, which is best case scenario because we love it
Wow.
here. Even being from Southern California, my husband's from Northern California. Coming here, had we come straight from California, it would have been just a really hard adjustment to the rain. I think it's
Yeah.
mild, but it's just rainy. But having gone to the East Coast and experienced the hot, humid summers and then the cold winters, when we came here to Oregon, we were like, oh, it's so mild. Oh my gosh, it only gets down to 40 in the winter mostly. And so we're like, this is amazing. It wasn't too bad. You used to have to get used to the rain, and kind of the rainy season lasts for a long time, but at
Yeah.
least it doesn't get that cold. And our
Is it
summers are
like the whole
glorious.
fall and the winter? Like the rainy season is basically fall, winter, part of the
And
spring?
spring, I mean, this year's been weird. I don't know if this is like global warming, but typically, at least the first couple of years we were here, October has a couple nice days and a couple rainy days. It's probably about a 50-50 split. In November, it pretty much is rainy just about every day. And then it's like that almost all the way through like March. And then, in February, we would get like 1 week of glorious sunshine, and you get fooled and you think, oh my gosh, maybe spring's going to come earlier. And then it starts raining again for another like straight 2 months. And then, people here joke that summer doesn't actually really, really start until 4th of July, because sometimes our Junes are, even though they're a lot warmer, still raining.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so
We're
it's
in the
wild.
desert, so when it rains,
I
we're
know.
like,
You're
we're
like,
to have like flattened the curve, and they're saying maybe in May or June we'll have like a smaller